everybody, and welcome back to the Game Chamber. And today we are talking about my top 10 games that deserve a sequel. Now, a couple of these are newer titles that there's still quite a bit of hope that maybe we will see a sequel or a reboot or some type of follow-up to this title. But a lot of these are forgotten titles from generations past, games that I felt were underrated or underappreciated, or even games that a lot of us loved that for some reason they just never decided to follow up with a sequel. Starting off at number 10 is a game that a lot of people probably don't want a sequel to, but I saw nothing but wasted potential for the Order 1886. This was a game that came out in the PS4 era, and there was so much hype behind this title, to the point where when it came out and it was getting lukewarm to bad reviews, it was almost shocking. The level of production value, the level of the concept and the ideas on screen, as well as just how gorgeous the game looked in all of its early trailers and all of its early gameplay reveals, made it very hard to stomach the fact that a lot of people were not happy with the final release of the Order 1886. And a lot of the issues came from the fact that the game just felt like there wasn't enough there. The campaign was a lot shorter than you would have expected. A lot of it was quick time events, a lot of it was cutscenes, and so even the amount of game that you actually do have in the final release, there's not enough of it that's actually genuinely playable. So there was so many great ideas, so many great concepts, just the fact of having the time period of 1886 and having these soldiers that are out there fighting against these half-breeds and these lichens, and there's also vampires in the mix later on in the game that we find out about, and just so much that was blending the old time period piece of with these new modern technologies, this Nikola Tesla weapons, he's like a member of the Order, as well as just this flavor of Underworld, which is a film series that I really enjoy. There was so much potential for this to not only just be a fantastic game, but for this to really kick off a fantastic franchise, and they just really shit the bed with the first game. So a lot of people are not going to probably want a sequel. A lot of people are still kind of suffering through their disappointment with the first game because of how hyped it was, but if Ready at Dawn ever felt like going back to the drawing board and trying to right the ship with the Order franchise, I will be there day one to check out whatever they get. Number 9 is a fairly recent game that we're most likely to get a sequel from, and that is Bloodborne. Now, this was actually my first From Software game. I had never played any of the Demon Souls or Dark Souls games that came before that, and Bloodborne since has made me a fan of that entire franchise, subgenre, whatever you want to call it, developer From Software. And for a certain degree, there is a lot of familiarity to the Dark Souls games, as well as Sekiro, as well as likely Elden Ring whenever we get to play that here in a couple of weeks, that kind of softens the blow if we never do get a sequel to Bloodborne, because essentially they're all very similar games, but I still love Bloodborne the most. There was something about the ferocity, about the speed in which you had the combat in that game, the way that the world was realized. It was a lot more gothic and monstrous than some of the games that I've played that tend to be a little bit more mythic in the Dark Souls and Demon Souls games. So if we don't get a sequel to Bloodborne, I'm sure From Software is going to appease us very much with Elden Ring and whatever other properties they decide to bring out. But Bloodborne, above all, to me, feels like something that could really be a franchise that sets itself apart from something like Dark Souls and continues to build upon how awesome that original game was. Number 8 is going to be a game that half of you are going to go, wow, I totally forgot about that, and half of you are going to go, I never heard of this fucking thing. And that is Psi Ops, the Mindgate Conspiracy. This came out for the PS2 and the original Xbox in the summer of 2004, I believe. Now, this is a game that kind of got lost in the mix because there was another game that came out called Second Sight that was very similar to this, yet very different, and they both kind of cannibalized each other as far as the hype and as far as probably money as well, however much revenue these games got. But I really preferred Psi Ops. Psi Ops was the darker, a little bit more bloodier version of the two, and essentially you take a hold of this soldier that has his memory wiped, and you're going against all of these big bosses that have defected from the Psi Ops unit, which are these soldiers that use psychic powers like telekinesis, pyrokinesis, mind control, things like that, and have defected and created their own little terrorist network. And so you have to go through and kill all of these individual bosses and take their powers, building up throughout the game your repertoire of telekinetic, pyrokinetic, etc. powers. And it was just a really cool third-person shooter. It was a good shooter in and of itself, but being able to pick things up and throw them across the room and splat somebody against the wall or set somebody on fire or drain the energy out of their brain to heal yourself, It was dark, but it was fun, and it had a pretty cool little nifty, yet very campy storyline. And above all else, the thing ends in a cliffhanger. It ends with "to be continued," and they never fucking continued it. So this is a game that is not very likely to ever get a sequel, otherwise we would have gotten one, but I still have fond memories of the original Psi Ops, and if they ever decided to reboot or give a sequel, which I would definitely prefer, I would be excited as hell. This is a very cool, underknown property that just never got the steam, never got rolling the way that it deserved to. Number 7 is Brutal Legend. Now this admittedly kind of fell to the wayside because it was released the same weekend as Uncharted 2 Among Thieves, and I pre-ordered and went and picked up both of these the same night. And Brutal Legend was one that I was actually sucked into to the point where I kind of put Uncharted 2 on the back burner for a while. It was essentially Jack Black playing this cartoon version of himself, this guy who is a roadie, and he gets sucked into this fantastical world where all of the themes and the cliches and the in-jokes of metal fans were just kind of brought to life in this world. And you had voice acting from like Rob Halford and Ozzy Osbourne, and I think even Lemmy was in there. And it was just such a fun game. It was niche as hell. If you weren't a metal fan or a rock fan, there was a lot that was gonna go over your head, but the soundtrack was awesome, the gameplay was fun, kind of combining this like third-person sword-wielding slasher game with like this strategy thing with the bosses to where you actually had to send in troops and try to maintain the health of your squad while taking out theirs. It was just a lot of creativity, and it's a game that was unlike nothing else. So understandably, being that it was niche, it wasn't a huge runaway hit, but for those of us that did love it, we still have fond memories of it, and I would love to see Jack Black come back one more time for Brutal Legend 2. Number 6 is unfortunately a game that the more we talk about it, the less likely a sequel seems to be, but Days Gone. Days Gone was a game that I really enjoyed when it came out. I understood a lot of the criticism hailed at it because it's a game that really takes a while to get going. It's a game that advertised prominently the whole aspect of going in and taking out these hordes, which really wasn't an aspect of the game that you really focused on until like the last third of the story. And there was a lot of things about this that felt familiar to The Last of Us, which was another giant PlayStation property that they certainly have a lot more weight in. And so Days Gone kind of felt like one of the very rare PlayStation first-party titles that came out and didn't really land with audiences. It didn't really take off the way that they expected it to. It's gained a lot more of a following since, as the game has gone on sale, has been on PC, has been a part of the PlayStation Plus collection, things like that. And so there's a lot more fans of this game now realizing how good this game really is once you take the time to get into the meat of the story and how great the character of Deacon St. John is and how much potential this really does have for a franchise. But unfortunately, the numbers don't lie, and the numbers speak the loudest, and it didn't make the sales that PlayStation was hoping it would, and they're probably not going to put the money or the faith into the studio to make a sequel. Even though they pitched a sequel, the sequel was denied. So I'll still hold on to a little bit of faith that eventually maybe they will throw caution to the wind and bring back Days Gone for one more try. And I have all the faith in the world if they do get that chance, we're going to get a much better, much more accepted game. But it's a game right now that I feel is very underrated and certainly deserves a second chance. Number 5 is going to be Bulletstorm. Now, luckily they did a remaster for this for the PS4 and gained a lot more fans and a lot more appreciation for this property, but this thing was like dead on arrival when it came out for the PS3 and the Xbox 360. And I did not understand why. I mean, as popular as first-person shooters were and continue to be, this was such a unique take on the genre to where you're these foul-mouthed little space pirates and you basically have all of these little creative kills that you're trying to do. You have a gun, you have your boot where you get to stomp and kick people, and you have this little electric slingshot thing, like a grappling hook, and you utilize all three of those to make up all these different kills to where you can slingshot somebody towards you and kick them in the fucking head and make their head explode. You have different guns. One of them's like a drill that shoots these little drill projectiles where you can shoot somebody in the ass and get something called dildo. There was so much foul-mouthed and rated R creativity in this game that it was just endlessly replayable.
Help us get an evac off-world!
Yeah? Go fuck yourself! You shitpaws give chase, I will kill your dicks!
What? What does that even mean? You're gonna kill my dick? Well, I'll kill your dick! How about that, huh?
Well, I can't tell you how many times I went back over different missions in this game just to try to get all of these different little skill shots that they call them. And it was just a concept to me that really lends itself well to a franchise. And it's a story that is so goofy and so silly, and characters that are so over the top that they could easily just be ramped up more and more every time you go back to them. It made complete sense that Duke Nukem became a playable character in the remastered version, because it's just right in that realm of tone and of humor with the Duke Nukem franchise. So I don't know why this game never took off. I thought that it was awesome. I thought it was creative as hell. And for as saturated as the first-person shooter market has become and will continue to be, I think that this is something that really does break the mold and stands out as something unique that we need a sequel to. Number 4 is Jade Empire. Now, this is the same studio that gave us the Knights of the Old Republic, one of the greatest RPGs of all time. They gave us Mass Effect, the trilogy that is like one of the most hailed trilogies of all time. And right sandwiched in between those was a little game called Jade Empire that came out for the original Xbox that really felt like this forgotten gem. They took a lot of what they did with Knights of the Old Republic and incorporated it into Japanese culture, and through different styles of martial arts and different like magical powers that are very prominent in that style of film and lore, and created this really great RPG that I had a blast with. I thought it was really fun to play. I thought that it broke up the RPG combat enough to where it felt like you were actively kicking ass throughout this game and not just sitting there and choosing attacks like a lot of the previous games from this developer, like the Knights of the Old Republic games. And it told a great story. And with the revitalization of how much people love that style of game with the Ghost of Tsushima release and how popular that game has become, I think now's a perfect time to go back to the well of Jade Empire and bring us another one. Everybody loves Mass Effect. We're not really sure if we're ever going to get a follow-up to Mass Effect, since Andromeda really didn't land. And so why not take all the things that you have learned, all of the improvements that you have made through the Mass Effect trilogy, and apply it to Jade Empire? I think it's a perfect time, now better than ever, to do a Jade Empire sequel. Number 3 is another one of those games that a lot of you have never heard of, and a lot of you are going to go, wow, I totally forgot about that one. And that is Enslaved Odyssey to the West. This was such a badass game. I mean, this predated Uncharted and predated so many games that have gone on to kind of master this type of gameplay, the climbing, the exploration, the third-person combat. And this did it in such a unique way to where even Horizon, the Horizon franchise, is kind of like an improvement on the concept here, to where it's in the future, but in the future the Earth has kind of regressed. So you have the technology of the future, but all of the humans left alive are kind of like in caveman state. And so you have one character that's essentially like a caveman, and then you have another character that you have to protect the entire game, who is this woman, and you're trying to get her all the way through traveling west to this destination. And the whole game is this third-person staff bow combat. Eventually there's shooting projectiles. There's this thing called a cloud that you get on that's essentially like a hoverboard, skateboard, and certain things where you're trying to catch various technological monsters like little T-Rexes that are running around and little monsters like that. I mean, there was so much creativity and so much fun and so much varied gameplay in this game that it blew my mind when I finally found this and played it and go, why is nobody freaking out about how awesome this thing is? And it just never quite caught on. It never really got the reputation that I felt this game really deserved. This was the definition of hidden gem. And for as popular as games like this have become with Uncharted, with the Horizon series that we're about to get our first sequel to here in a week or so, I think it's a great time to bring back Enslaved and throw it right back into the mix with this action-adventure genre that is just booming right now. So I don't know what the hell ever happened to this game. I don't know why it came out so quietly, why more people don't gush about it like I do, but it deserves a sequel so more people can gush about it. Remaster the original and then give us a follow-up. Do it. Number 2 is possibly the game that breaks my heart the most that we never got a follow-up to, and that is Conkers Bad Fur. Easily one of my favorite games from the N64, and easily one of my favorite games of all time. This is one of those games that I have beaten so many times that it probably would bring you to nausea to know how many times I've just gone through this story. One of the first things that I did when I got Game Pass was download the original Conkers Bad Fur Day and the rare replay version and play through those. At the time, there was just nothing like this game. There was nothing that had the humor, the creativity, the pop culture references, and just told such a fun, gritty, and this vile storyline. It was so bad and so disgusting and so rated R for this animated little third-person squirrel game that it was just the perfect mix of weird. Everything about it should not have worked, but it worked so well. And then Xbox, Microsoft bought Rare and just never did anything with it. Never did anything with the Rare properties, if we can be completely honest. What a fucking waste. But this one especially, like, it's probably way too far gone. Even if you did a sequel and it was on the level of brilliance of the first game, it probably would not succeed in today's game market. We've just advanced too much past that. But why we never got a follow-up to this with more recent movie references and an even more crazy storyline, talking about Conker and going on all these crazy little R-rated blood-filled adventures, just, it breaks my heart. For as amazing as Conkers Bad Fur Day is, why we never got a sequel is a question that I will never understand any version of the answer that I get. But by a landslide, my number one is a game that not only deserves a sequel the most, but still, every single day that passes, baffles the entire gaming community about why we have not gotten a sequel to Half-Life 2. Half-Life 2 was one of the greatest first-person shooters, one of the greatest campaigns ever made, and it still remains one of the greatest ever made. We got a couple of expansions. We got Episode 1 and Episode 2 that I played on the orange box on Xbox 360, and they were both great, and they both actually made the wound even deeper and put salt in the wound that we have not gotten a follow-up to Half-Life 2 yet, because Episode 2 ends on a giant cliffhanger with the death of a major character. And I know we got Half-Life Alyx. Honestly, I don't remember whether or not that's a sequel or something else in the world of Half-Life. I haven't had the chance to play it yet. I don't have the ability to play it. But the fact that we have not gotten a genuine Half-Life 3 for consoles or for PC, period, just makes absolutely no sense to me. For as successful and as critically hailed as Half-Life 2 and both of the episode expansions were, it's like, where the hell did Valve go? Did you guys just pack up your shit and just leave and say, you know what, we're gonna quit while we're on top. We're not gonna bother trying to follow up perfection. I don't know what the hell the deal is. And every single time it gets brought up, whether or not we're gonna hear about a Half-Life 3 announcement, every single console generation, every single E3, everybody waits. There's always a huge percentage of the gaming community that just waits for that surprise announcement that finally Gordon Freeman's coming back. And it just blows my mind. Of all of the games on this list, you have the most potential for a sequel, you have the most demand for a sequel, and you have the most confusion from gamers like me about why the hell they have not struck while the iron is hot, because even more than a decade later, that iron is still hot as fuck for Half-Life fans. Well, that's it, guys. That is my top 10 games that deserve a sequel. Please let me know your choices down below. I know we could probably talk about 50 games that deserve a sequel easily just off of the top of our head, so let me know which ones you want the most and which ones you actually think we might get, which ones have the biggest chance of actually happening. Thank you for watching, and please like and share this video. Hit that subscribe button, as all of my video game content will be on this channel from now on if you are coming from my main channel. If you're finding me on this channel, I actually have another YouTube channel that I've had for years that's a lot bigger than this one, where I do a lot of movie reviews and movie rankings and things like that. So the link will be down for that in the video description below. Become a subscriber to that as well. Thank you guys for watching once again, and remember, the Game Chamber is Commander Shepard's favorite channel on the YouTubes.